Welcome to the Untitled podcast. Leave your egos at the door. Thank you for joining today. Today we have a special guest and I just remembered this, my first female guest. So Congratulations. You are showing that I'm not sexist.
I tried.
At least I hope. Maybe I'm still going to come across as a horrible misogynist on this podcast, but we'll see how it goes. But we do have to share who our sponsor for the episode is today. Today's sponsor for the podcast is popcorn. We will get stuck in your teeth and you will hate us. I did eat some popcorn the other day and it was delicious, but it did get so stuck in my teeth. And there's always like that weird little partial shell thing that like gets stuck between like your gum and your tooth.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there digging at it with my tongue for like 2 hours. I don't know if I'll ever eat popcorn again after that.
All the time.
But it was so good. It was like, so at Walmart, right when you walk in the store, they have what I call the ADHD items of like, this is going to jack my dopamine up and make me feel really good about life.
Yes.
So they had like this table with all these like fall treats out on it. And they had this thing of like peanut butter popcorn mix. And I'm like, oh, I got to do that.
You have to.
Yeah. So I bought it. And then I'm eating this. And I'm looking at the package. And I don't think much of it. It's not a very big package. And I ate the whole thing. And then I turned it over and it was like 14 servings at like 120 calories a piece. I'm like, I'm supposed to be the health guy.
That's why I always turn it over after.
Yeah. So then you feel shame and guilt when you're done rather than while you're eating it.
You enjoy it while you're eating it.
Yeah. Check your calorie labels, people. Maybe before. Don't. Well, depends. Maybe not check it. I was really, really excited to have you on, and for a few reasons. So Chelsea and I got to know each other a little bit through two things. One, we both worked at the Dream Center.
Mm-hmm.
And two, we both attended the same support group.
Yes. And
with support groups, there's, you can't necessarily share like a whole lot of what is talked about in support groups, but we met at the same support group at Journey Church, one of the largest support groups in, probably the largest support group that's free in Lincoln County, and one of the larger ones in Eastern Missouri, for sure. And I guess I don't want to say too much about you before I tell a little bit more about how we got to know each other. So if you had to give a 30-second introduction to people about, hey, hi, I'm Chelsea, what would you tell someone?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I'd probably feel more comfortable if someone else told, right? I just...
Best hair in Troy.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Right?
I had similar hair color for a little bit, and I don't know. I couldn't keep it up. I got too many looks. A girl can have that hair color. It's no big deal. A guy, everyone's questioning things about him.
The best compliment I've ever gotten is someone goes, you know what? Purple actually looks good on you. And it's
actually.
It's the best. I actually have a shampoo. I just color it as needed or mix it up every day. It's a blast.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Whenever my wife does that, I call that the backhanded compliment, which would be like, wow, that's actually good. I'm like, actually, like,
you're
hey,
like,
this is baseline.
Like, what do you mean?
I'm just this good.
Yes.
What are you talking about? Actually good.
I know. It's my favorite. And I it's not purple right now, but I do love having purple hair.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a huge desire to learn. I love learning, and particularly anything psychology, mental health. Like, I want to know all about it. That's actually what got me to go to Journey Church, is because like one of the first sermons I attended, Pastor Jesse was like showing statistics from psychology research.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, hey.
Journey Church is probably the only church I've ever been to that puts as much of an emphasis on mental health of any church. Like, I can't count how many churches I've been to in my life. And it's the only one I've been to where they've had an on-staff counselor.
Yeah. So
that's incredible. And that along with their like recovery program, on-staff counselors. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. But that's always been a passion of mine as long as I can remember. Like, I want to know how I tick, how other people tick. Like, I want to know. I just want to know. And I want to know how to best support people. Like, I want to know what works and what doesn't work. Like, I'm holding magnets, right?
Yeah.
And I always hold magnets. And I have a whole bag. My bag is full of toys, truly. I won't even lie. always. You know that.
Oh yeah. We've got the superhuman trait of ADHD.
Yeah.
And I sit here and I fiddle with my knees like this. I'll sit here and like play the keyboard on my knees, and you've got the magnet. So as long as my hands are hidden under the table, I'm not distracting
Yeah,
anyone.
I actually got like really intimidated when I saw you and Mike's podcast because I was like, why are they so still? And then when you invited me, I was like, I can't sit that still.
Well, full disclosure, I had been up for almost 30 hours when I did that podcast.
That was the best way to be
yeah, that was.
That's
I
how
was
we
holding
make
on
Zach
by a
still.
thread. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it comes from that. Like I was diagnosed with ADHD really late in life. I think I was like 22 or 23.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh wow, that clicks. Like that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And trying to figure that out and make the world kind of work for me instead of trying to fit into. I always talk about the box. Like, you know, the world has a box and they want you to fit into it, and then when you don't, especially as a kid, it's awful.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to try to figure out like how do I make the box work for me, and then finally figure out like I can just figure out my own way instead of trying to fit into someone else's box.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the in the American system in general, like it's not designed to promote creativity as much as they would like to tell you that that's what it, you know, like, oh, well, capitalism allows for all these different things. It's like, no, that it may, but the problem is the system, the educational system, the college system, it promotes workers for certain industries that they see fit. And people who don't fit into those boxes tend to struggle, or they tend to be magnificent people. Like they're pushed more towards creative things like art and music and maybe talking about their feelings on a podcast.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think, you know, with a group, in order for it to be successful, you kind of do need some level of cohesion. And so when you're a kid, it's like, I need everyone to sit down and listen because I'm trying to tell you something. But that's why I love group as an adult, because it can become cohesively what we're all needing. And it's a safe place to do it. So I just get amped when I get to be a part of a group.
Yeah. Going to the Thursday night group while it was active was a really unique thing for me personally. I had never been to, and I don't want to call it group therapy, even though it really kind of was. It was more of a support group, but it was so open and there was such a trusting environment in there for the most part. Like most nights, it was a good group of people and you could be very open. And that was a very new dynamic for me because I had only gone to counseling in a 1-to-1 or marriage counseling 2-to-1 format. So having that broader perspective on things really made me realize, as bad as I feel like my life is right now, there are other people going through it much worse or just differently, and they're here. They're making it work. So it was it was a good thing, and I wish I would have been better about it. I was just going through so many weird things in my life at that time that sometimes it was hard for me to convince myself to go.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember like I didn't realize I was doing this thing, but I remember this moment when Jenny looks at me and she goes, "You didn't tell me what was going on. Like I had no idea. This is bad." And it was like the situation I was in was bad.
Yeah.
And I realized I would only tell people the problems I knew the solutions to.
Yeah.
Right? So that now I'm strong, right? Because I can tell you, well, I have this whole thing going on, but I got, you know, I'm quitting this job. It's toxic, but I have this other job lined up, you know, whatever it is. So that way I've got it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, hey, so here's the problem and here was my solution.
Yeah.
Rather than, and I don't know if where that stems from, because I have that too, where it's like, I will only share the problems that I'm struggling to solve with a very select group of people. And I've learned recently to be more open about that, to get more input. And it's not that I'm taking advice from everyone, but it's more of getting everyone else's perspective and realizing like there's other views out there other than my own. And while I might think I have the answer, I just have a answer.
Yeah. Well, and it's been in those moments when I've spoken out with someone that it really took me past my comfort level, that like this knot I'd been trying to untie suddenly they say something and it's like, oh my gosh, that, how did
Yeah.
I miss that? That's
Yeah.
it.
Seriously, those aha epiphany moments.
Right.
Yeah. It's like that from the mouth of babes kind of thing. Like you just hear someone say something and it just completely opens it up.
Yeah, where it was like, hold on. Like Mike Shermanenko one night, he goes, next year is a blank canvas.
Mm.
And I was like, oh man. Like that's the answer. Like I am an artist. I create. Like I had this home and I had made it a home. And in that moment I realized like, I can take myself out of that home and I can make another one anywhere.
Yeah.
Because I made that one, you know?
Yeah.
Like that. Wait a minute, what am I doing? Like you ever strangled something trying to hold on to it?
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Not to get too much into anything immediately, but absolutely.
It's like that moment where you realize you're doing it. Like, oh.
Yeah. You're like you get to a point where you're afraid that if you let go, it's like that giving up the control. And I think for me, that's really where it stems from, is that need for control. And it's like the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know kind of thing.
Yep.
So I'll at least sit here with this horrible situation that I have grown comfortable with, rather than put myself in the situation of having to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
Adapting is hard at first, but
Well, and with ADHD, for me, I think the first 2 months after I moved out of that space, right, and I move into this other house, I was like 30 minutes late to work. Like
yeah,
20 minutes late, 15 minutes late, 10 minutes, and then almost consistently like 5 minutes late.
yeah,
And then finally my boss was like, you have to be on time. And it was like, I was so off on my routine.
yeah,
I couldn't get it. And it took me probably like 2.5 to 3 months to get back into a routine that supported my ADHD.
yeah.
Like I had so many steps on my watch before I ever even left the house, because I'd go here and I'd forget this here. And it's difficult to change.
Yeah, and especially like we're so hardwired for routine and pattern. Like if you study the human brain, and like that's I think really where me and you kind of connected the most, is that insatiable desire to understand and to have a knowledge of how things work.
Yeah.
And I realized that about you when you first taught in group, and it was such a basic person could understand it, but it was such a deeper thing, like the science behind what you were sharing. And when I really got into studying like the brain and why we are the way that we are, and I realized like our brain's just trying to make it be lazy. Like that's really what it is. And especially someone with ADHD, it's like if our brain perceives something to be not the most fulfilling, it's like, I'm just going to go on autopilot here and we'll wait for the next cool thing to pop up and get a little hit of that good.
Yes.
And I didn't know that about myself. Like I was late diagnosis too. I thought I had depression and anxiety. And I realized that I didn't when I got my hormone levels in the correct place, because I also had a very low testosterone level for such a long period of time and had no idea that that's kind of why I was a little bit melancholy. And then once I got those hormones balanced and I was like, well, I'm not really depressed and anxious, but I still have all these other symptoms of just feeling like I can't really focus. Like nothing really seems to be worth my time. And at 30 years old, I get diagnosed with ADHD and put on medication. I'm like, hey, I can do stuff for longer than 10 minutes. I can remember to close a cabinet when I open it. Or like when my wife says, can you change over the dishwasher? It's like, I can remember to do that. Or I guess not, you don't change over a dishwasher. It's the laundry. Yeah, changing over the laundry.
Yeah,
that's a
I'm
big
still
one
not
for
good
me.
at emptying the dishwasher though.
Neither am I. She bought this little thing on it that says hella clean or hella dirty. And she flips it for me so I know when it's clean. And then if I like walk by and see it and I'm not in the middle of doing something, I'm like, okay, I can unload this. I can win some points here.
I still have to trick myself. I'm like, all you have to do is put the silverware away, you know? And then Because if I do that, then I'll actually unload it. If I tell myself like unload this whole thing, my brain's like, oh, it's going to take forever.
Yeah.
And I won't do it.
The truth is I enjoy washing dishes, especially like if I get into a groove, I throw on a podcast or some music, I'll sit there and hand wash dishes. I'll sit there and I'll fold laundry, mow the yard. Like I love being busy. It's just when it's not my idea,
Oh,
it's the worst.
I'm so rebellious.
Yes. And it's not good for being married to a type A who wants to be like, can you do this, this, and this? And I'm like, I was already going to do that, but now I don't want to. I don't want to do that now because you told me to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the worst.
I am
such a bad dynamic.
So I identify as a begrudgingly obedient Christian. and I don't know what it is, but I know it's God because I don't want to do it. I'm like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. And so then I'll show up and do it. But I'm just like, I'm here.
Yeah. I'm here, but I don't want to be.
I don't want to do what he's saying, but I know I have to.
Yeah, I'm still struggling in that department. I think too much about God to like stay focused on it for a long time because then my brain goes into this place of like, well, why is God good? All right, is he good because he tells us he's good? Well, what if somebody else told me they were good and I saw the actions that they did and I didn't deem them to be good? Does that still mean that they're good? And I'm sitting here like turning into, I'm having a literally like a meltdown in my brain, like trying to logic out God, the most illogical thing that's ever been thought of or existed. If there is a God, if the God of the Bible is the true creator of the universe, it's the most illogical thing in the whole world. It makes no sense. So it's like, that's why there's that whole F word, faith, and you have to kind of step into it. And I meet with people about it because like they kind of keep me on track and keep me from getting too far off. So like I meet with Stan and I meet with Jesse and they kind of pick my brain a little bit to figure out where I'm at. And then through that Socratic method of like asking questions and answering them, I kind of figure out what I actually believe. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of people actually know what they believe sometimes because they don't sit down and have the conversations about it. They don't know what they believe about themselves or the world around them. And I think about it way too much. So there is balance in that too.
Excuse me. I had that too. Like, I remember this moment of like, okay, if I think about it kind of like a scientist, right? So if God made me, he would make me to know him.
Yeah.
And so then I just stayed with that question. Like, wouldn't he? And it was so interesting because then I look for him.
Yeah.
And then I found him. You know what I'm saying? Like those moments, I don't know, that's my grounding when I get those head places where I just start kind of branching out too far. I start to get too far from what that balance is. And then, okay, he made me to know him, right? If he made me, he would make me to know him, period. So then looking has grounded me because I struggle with that same of I overthink.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to kind of have like this, I had to have this logic game played out with myself over nihilism. And I had to figure out if there's one thing in this world that intrinsically has meaning, well, then that means nihilism can't be real because the whole concept of nihilism is that everything is meaningless, essentially. Like that there is no purpose, there's no value, that everything is just random. And if everything is just random and here by chance, then nothing has true meaning. And I had to look at it and think, well, is meaning and purpose the same thing? Not necessarily, but it's close enough. So I used that to kind of start. And I was like, okay, so a chair has a purpose and a chair was created. A chair's creation is to serve the purpose of sitting on. And then I kind of expanded out from there. I was like, so if a chair has meaning and a chair has purpose, then that means do all created things have meaning and purpose? So then I was like, okay, well, a chair serves a purpose, a table serves a purpose. And I was like, so literally everything that has ever been invented was invented to solve a problem or to have a purpose. And from there, I was like, okay, so then do human beings have a purpose? Like, and I had to, that's really where it turns into this metaphysical idea of like, do I genuinely believe that human beings, our existence in general has purpose? And if it does, then it has to have a creator, because nothing that exists that has a purpose doesn't have a creator.
Mm.
So I kind of had to
Yeah.
play a logic game from there. And then from that, it was like, so if we look at all religions, and all religions acknowledge Jesus as some form of a God or God, then, and he's the only one who says, I'm God, well, then it makes logical sense that if everyone at least points to him and he points to himself, that he's probably the number one choice of that. So I kind of logicked myself into God. It's really easy to logic yourself out of it at times, when you're in your funk, and then you're like, nihilism sounds kind of good.
Yeah.
but yeah, that was how I kind of arrived at it. And I still struggle with it, because I didn't have, like, at times I would like to believe that I have these aha moments where it's like this Holy Spirit moment, I guess you would say, but I still struggle with that kind of thing. So,
I think so. So my test, I worked as an adolescent counselor in a rehab for kiddos, for
yeah.
boys. They were there for 90 days, and we had this kid. Oh, nobody was going to help him. No, and literally nobody. Like, he had been through the ringer. He had been through so many different facilities, and people let him down all the way. And it was the first time I think I kind of tested faith, where it was like, not tested, but like trusted it. So every time I'm with this kid, before I opened my mouth, I prayed.
Oh,
Every sentence. There was nothing else to do. He is a wonderful human
yeah.
who is very gifted and talented in many ways and has struggled. And he knows I'm talking about him if he ever listens to it.
Hey, guy.
And I remember praying and praying and praying. And there was this one moment where I said, why are you playing hot potato with me? And he's like, hot potato? What do you mean? I'm like, and it was the weirdest thing, because I felt like God said to say that, which was so dumb.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the dumbest thing to say. I'm not going to say that out loud, right? And he's like, hot potato? What are you saying? It's the first time I've seen this kid laugh, right? And I said, every time I hand you control, you throw it back at me. Every time I try to empower you, you throw it back and try to place me in power over you. I'm not doing that.
Interesting.
And he was like, hot potato. Like,
It like hit him.
right. And I watched him shift and own his power. And he led him and 7 other kids to form like the most close-knit group I've ever seen in my life. And they created systems and processes at that facility that stayed until it closed. They stayed there. They created chore charts, and every week, once a week, they would meet together for a therapeutic community group, and they would talk about what was going wrong and what they needed to work on. It was amazing. He created that.
That's awesome.
And it was like, I remember standing outside and looking kind of through these pine trees at the sun and going, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. And I called my boss. I was like, I don't know why I'm freaking out. I'm like so overwhelmed. He goes, I think that's God. Just let him in.
Just let it roll.
just let it come in. Like, that's fine. But it took me having faith that he would work in someone else's life, I think, to start to see that he would work in mine.
Yeah, that was a big, so that was one of those things that I really struggled with as well. Like, I would see people have these relationships with God, and they looked enviable in some ways. And I was like, oh, well, I want that. And then my experience was so different because my expectations were at a different place. And so it would like lead me to these places of doubt where it was like, well, if I can't have that experience, then I don't know if I want any of it, kind of thing. But that's a beautiful story about that kid and kind of going from pushing away responsibility and leadership to taking it.
Man, he ran it.
That's beautiful.
And it's so good.
He's still doing good now?
He's not. He's struggling. But he's one of those that I know God has a calling for.
Yeah.
I remember him and I crying in the van, like the facility van, like before he's leaving, and like praying together. Like him asking for that prayer, right? And it's just, the life is hard for him.
Yeah.
And addiction is hard.
Yeah, addiction's brutal.
But I know where he'll be one day.
Yeah. Yeah, addiction, for people who don't struggle with any form of addiction, it's really tough to try to explain like this overwhelming compulsion towards an action that you know is detrimental to your survival, yet you feel lost without it. Like,
Ooh.
you know, you're drinking poison. And I don't mean that literally in just the form of like alcohol. I just mean like it's like buying poison and putting it in your food and putting it on your bed and doing all these things. And then you tell yourself, I'm not going to buy poison anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. And then you wake up with the poison in your hand. You're like, oh, well, this feels normal. So I'm going to just roll with it.
Yeah.
And it's not always substances. Like it's just addiction behavior. It's like just this draw to something.
Yeah, it's so Maslow's hierarchy of needs puts that physiological at the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And so it's actively working against our survival, the addiction is, but it's actually working on the survival mechanisms. So it feels like we need it in order to survive.
Yeah.
And it changes your homeostasis, it changes everything. And so when you don't have it, like I've always told the story, like, okay, so my grandma was like, will you go to the store? Because I need milk and I'm going to make you biscuits and gravy. I'm like, that sounds amazing, right? Like,
Grandma's a
I
great
will go
lady.
however far you need. Okay.
Yes.
So I get back and I have milk, right? Because we're going to eat. And she's like, I need something else too. Like, can you run back to the store? And I wanted to hit my grandma. Right? Like, I'm like, I am hungry. I just went all the way to the store, right? I've been awake for 2 hours. I want food. Like,
I need me some biscuits and gravy.
And so I like went over and she had this little bag of chocolate donuts and I just opened it and I grabbed one. I was like, I'll be back. Like, I was so mad. But it's that. Like, I didn't care about my grandma because I was hungry.
Yeah.
Right? So and I love my grandma, she's best. But if you had, it's actually Nanny, so if she hears it, right?
Yeah.
But most people are like, Nanny. So if something is threatening that basic building block of that foundation, then we're going to lash out, right? We're going to try and figure that out.
Yeah.
So if you come up and go, you need to not use that substance anymore, you're going to be like, I know what you need to do,
Yeah.
Kick rocks.
Absolutely.
And then I heard Steve-O say it in a podcast, but he said, you don't suffer from addiction until you get sober.
Damn, ain't that the truth?
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like because really I don't think it's like this. Steve-O actually, the way that he talks about it is quite eloquent for someone with such a severe history of substance abuse, and he makes it understandable to most people. And there actually, I think, is a podcast with maybe it's Steve-O and Bert Kreischer where he's trying to explain addiction, and Bert says this thing along the lines of like, I just get something in my head and I have this repetitive thought over and over and over again, and it cycles around and cycles around, and the next thing I know, I'm drinking. And he's like, yeah, that's addiction. And Bert like kind of has this moment in his mind where you see it kind of hit him of, well, and then he laughs like, because he's a comedian and he's going to defer to comedy when things get real. And that's nothing against Bert.
Most I do that all the time.
Yeah, it's a pretty normal human behavior. But like the way, if you want to know more about what that's like, I would suggest looking up that Steve-O clip, because he's someone who has really overturned some crazy, crazy substance use in his life. And surprisingly, he's still pretty good mentally, especially given his substances of choice.
Right.
But yeah, and it's weird. Like, you will convince yourself in your head that like you're not addicted. I'm not addicted. I can quit whatever I want. And then you'll have this like, I'm gonna go to sleep. This is the last day I'm gonna do this. I'm not gonna wait. Tomorrow I'm not gonna smoke. Tomorrow I'm not gonna drink. And then you wake up and you totally forget the commitment you made to yourself. And like the first thing you do is reach over and grab and use. And then you're like, well, dang.
Yeah, the shame hits after.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because it's a higher level, right? So physiologically you met that need, and now I can start to think about its impact on my relationships and on all my safety and security, like all these other things. It doesn't even register until then.
Yeah.
That's what's mind-blowing about it.
Yeah, it's like I have to because that's your new baseline. So it's like, I have to get this baseline from this huge deficit of how it feels to this elevated place just to feel normal. And then when it starts to crash, it's like, well, now you use again and use again and use again. And you do build up the tolerance to it where it's like you have to use more. And that's one thing. But it's just like this idea that I'm normal when I'm intoxicated.
Well, and the interesting thing I've always thought about tolerance is that if you see the drug, if you see, the advertisement, if you see it already drops you below baseline. That craving process actually drops you below the baseline because it's anticipating you're about to use.
Yeah.
So that's what makes the first parts of recovery so hard. I think I had quit smoking cigarettes, I think for maybe 2 years. And I'm driving behind someone in a truck and they blow out cigarettes and my mouth immediately starts watering.
Yeah.
Because it's anticipating I'm going to smoke a cigarette, even though I haven't done that in like 2 years or however many years it had been at that time. Like, it's a programmed response that puts you out of homeostasis just based off of seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. There was this really interesting study that they talk about in a book, I think by Charles Duhigg, called The Power of Habit. And he references this study with monkeys, and essentially monkeys are given a substance that is addictive. I believe it was like cocaine laced grape juice or something crazy, and they get hooked on it. And then in anticipation, their brain would start rewarding them for knowing that they're about to get it. And then when they didn't get it, they would have this intense crash with their levels. So like that was like how they identified addiction versus like a habit, was like the brain pre-rewarding you for the substance use. And it's like the anticipation of it, needing it, and that instant relief that you feel once you've used, but it like already starts to kind of like get you there and ready for it beforehand, that you almost have like, I wish there was an easy way for people to become unaddicted. I wish there was like this genuine thing. And honestly, I think that the study that's going into psychedelics right now is starting to show that there's some promising stuff coming out of that, with almost like how it's allowing people to get free of it.
Yeah, and disrupting the wiring of all that.
Yeah. The best way that I can kind of explain it to people is like, imagine that you decide you want to go skiing, and there's this mountain and it's got slopes, and eventually after time, you get these ruts worn into the mountain where it's like there's so many people that have gone down this one part of the slope that it becomes a fast track for getting down, and it becomes this path that it commonly takes. And what they're kind of seeing with like psychedelic research is it kind of wipes out all that. It kind of puts like a fresh blanket of snow over your brain and allows this new pathway to be formed. And people have been using them for years and generations for different things, but like specifically the psilocybin research, the MDMA research, and the ibogaine, which ibogaine's a little bit different because it's supposed to be one of the most deep introspective things that you can do. But like, if they can find a way to make it not as like, I don't really know. I'm not a big fan of like government regulation, but at the same time, they have to make it more open and accessible for people to, I want to say, experiment with, to find out if there actually is some truth behind it. Like really, that is the beauty of science in general, is like having the freedom to kind of explore, as long as it's not harming people on such a drastic level.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the research that they've shown too is like doing it alongside a therapist, doing it alongside a team, doing
that
it
specifically.
Because
with like a mask on, certain pitches of music, like certain frequencies of music, like there's very specific way to do it that you actually have beneficial results.
Well, and so as someone who's led like counseling sessions and group counseling sessions, right? The environment has such an influence on how we behave. The way that you set a room up, the way, all of that directs our behavior. And if we don't know what we're directing, that could be really dangerous. Right? So if I just go, I want everybody to do this in this space, if we don't have it set up that way, like for me as a counselor, I'd rather be lower than you.
Mm.
I don't want to take a stance of power.
Yeah.
Because my goal is to empower you in your life, right? To help support you and lead you in that direction. I don't know all the answers.
Yeah.
But I believe you do. And I believe you can figure that out. And that with support systems, right? With people around you, that would help you have that authority, right? And so the way that we approach those things, like we hear things like this would help with this or this would help with that. We don't know all the nuances.
Yeah.
And so finding people who do is so cool and empowering because then they know more.
Yeah.
And then I can have that and build that and have that space to go to and learn in that setting because I'm trying to override something, right? I'm trying to take a different route and those skis are set in the line.
Yeah.
So unless someone's over there trying to build a space where I can veer off, I might not be able to get off of it.
Yeah. I also read something kind of interesting the other day, and I need to find the specific study because it was like somebody screenshot part of a study and in like a video, and they were talking about it, and I couldn't find the actual study, and I don't know if I was googling the wrong things, but it was talking about addiction in general, of like why do some people seem more susceptible to it when they actually realize that, according to this study, that there are certain people that you could literally give them a box of cigarettes and encourage them to smoke every day and they would never become physically addicted, versus someone who could smoke a cigarette one time and their brain is instantly like, I need this every day for the rest of my life. And why that is the case. And then there's some people that it's like they could become addicted, but maybe not. And then there's like this, it was almost split like this 30 of like 30% according to this study, which I need to find. And I'm talking about it without verifying it, which is dumb. But if you happen to have that study, send me the tags on it. Whoever, if someone's listening and is a brain person and likes to know weird stuff. But I just found that interesting, like that there are certain people who you have to be very, very careful. I'm one of those people that if a little bit's good, a lot's better. That's my personality.
So I think about so for me, nicotine, I smoked for 13 years. And I couldn't figure out why that was so hard to quit. I have ADHD.
Oh, I still can't quit.
I was consistently giving myself nicotine. You know what nicotine is? It's a stimulant.
Yeah.
So I was regulating my ADHD. So it's a higher likelihood that someone with ADHD would become addicted to nicotine or caffeine.
Yeah.
Right? It's also a stimulant. And so we're intuitive. We figure out this makes me feel good or this doesn't. This helps with something or this doesn't. The only way that I started to get control over my problem behaviors is I decided, gosh, this has been 7, 8 years ago, that I was like, it can't be the solution to anything. So drugs, alcohol, they just can't be the solution. And it stopped being the problem.
Interesting.
It was so weird. So, and we start using or doing those things because it's a solution, right? It's an immediate release in some way, shape, or form. So it helped me because working with adolescents in substance use, maybe I'm drinking alcohol on the weekends. That was convicting.
Yeah.
And so it's okay, it can't be the solution. Well, then when it wasn't the solution, I didn't want it.
That's tough.
I remember, so the other day I helped my dad and stepmom for 5 hours. We were cutting down a tree, and after that big storm came through, and when I came in, all I wanted was an ice cold beer. I haven't drank in a long time. So I'm okay, well, it was warm, right?
The beer was warm?
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently Bud Light or Budweiser gives Mercy employees free beer every year.
Seems
so my
reasonable.
dad just has case after case after case because he just uses it for barbecue.
Interesting.
So I had to put it in the fridge, right?
Yeah.
And then I go take a shower. I get some ice cold water. I never drank the beer.
Yeah.
I never drank it. So it's once I created those steps in between it and met needs in a different way, it wasn't even a craving anymore.
That is an interesting thought. The amount of times that I think the first time I ever tried nicotine, I was like 12 or 13 and like instantly loved it. Like, I think mom and dad are listening to this. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm sure I already do on a constant basis every time you see me with a new tattoo or piercing, but I love you guys and it'll be okay. So in 8th grade, so this will be let's go ahead and share some stuff here. So in 8th grade, I was suicidal, and my parents didn't necessarily know how to handle that, I don't think, and they pulled me out of school. This was all over my image. I was so self-conscious to the point where like I hated life because I was so unhappy with the way that I looked. That then led to me working for my dad in construction during the day and then kind of doing some schoolwork a couple days a week. Well, that I was surrounded by a lot of construction workers who are lovers of the nicotine themselves, lovers of a lot of indulgent behavior.
Yeah.
I remember this one electrician named Mitch, and he used to smoke these Camel Turkish Jades.
Oof.
And they were like a menthol cigarette. And for some reason, I thought the smell was like intoxicating. And I thought that smoking was like the coolest thing ever. Like, this guy's like a borderline dragon. He's breathing smoke. This is so awesome.
Borderline drag.
Yeah, I'm 13. And I remember one day he was at the job site and they had just put in the drywall. So he couldn't smoke in the house anymore because then it would start to smell. So he has to step outside to smoke. And he lights a cigarette, and then the other electrician goes like, "Hey, Mitch, I need you." And he like throws his cigarette on the ground, and I'm standing out there, and no one's around. My dad's not at the job site, so I'm like, I'm gonna pick that bitch up.
Right?
So I picked it up and took a drag off that cigarette, and I coughed, but that buzz I got in my head at that time was like the most intense rush I had ever felt. And I was instantly like, I need this every day for the rest of my life, nonstop. I need that head rush. And I remember I then put the cigarette out, I stuck it in my wallet, and I would like take that cigarette places and I'd take like one drag off of it like every week. Like when I'd get some alone time, like that was all I needed at the time. But that was where it started, was like that. I saw it and it looked like an appealing behavior. And it wasn't that that's why I did it. It was really like, because I coughed and I felt like crap afterwards, but that rush of like, I'm so overwhelmed with something good. And struggling with depression of what I thought at such a young age, it was just something that I couldn't get past. And I, for the next, now I'm 33, so now going on 20 years of starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping. I've tried so many different things. And I've gotten to this point where it's like, I genuinely love nicotine. And the only reason I don't want to smoke is because I know it will kill me. But at the same time, I love nicotine. And I still can't seem to get past it. It's like I've quit pills, I've quit weed, I've quit alcohol, I've quit all these different things. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, nicotine's like the one thing that's got me by the balls.
That was the hardest.
Yeah.
That was the hardest. I think I quit for 8 months, like 2 or 3 times, and would start up again. And I swore, okay, when I graduate Lindenwood, 2013, December, I'm going to quit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't quit, right?
Yeah.
So I go like 3 or 4 days past when I graduate, and I get so sick. I mean, I am deathly ill. Like, I can't breathe. I am just completely congested. My throat is like on fire. And I went 3 days naturally without smoking.
Wow.
And I was like, kind of felt like God just like put me in like the whale, was like, I can't do anything. And so I carried that pack of cigarettes around with me until Christmas.
Wow.
And so I pulled up at my mom's and my stepdad's out smoking, and I just hand him the pack because as soon as I smelled it, I just wanted to light it. And so I was just like, I can't have this anymore. But I still carried a lighter for like 3 years in my purse.
You were that person. Hey,
yes.
Does anyone have a lighter?
I do. What do you use that for? Nothing. But the idea
burning down houses
of getting rid of it, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. But it took forever to get that. And I remember the first time I coughed and it felt weird. Like I coughed and I was like, I don't remember the last time I coughed. That's weird. You know, like I hate it. And I always have these fantasies like, well, if you diagnose me with something terminal, you know, or I think I just talked to someone yesterday. I'm like, well, if I was in prison, I probably, I'm just going to go ahead. Right. I don't know what I'd ever go to prison for, but you know, there's this like,
I might find a reason to go to prison just so I can smoke.
But it's interesting because I had a boss tell me one time, he said, you have to take it off the shelf. So it can't be on the shelf anymore. And so I really hope I never go to prison because that's the only thing that's on the shelf, right? Yeah. Or if I'm diagnosed terminally ill, I'm like, oh, I'll go ham on all these things. But but I don't know.
That's where like God steps in, and like that's where I start to struggle. It's like in my head, it's like if someone told me I had a week to live, it's like, all right, I'm gonna do some crazy stuff. And then there's like this little good voice in the back of my head that goes, what about your wife and kids? Like, do you not care about them anymore just because you're gonna die?
Every time you'd step outside, you'd be stepping away from them to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. But there is this little devil in me that just wants to, like you said, just always rebel, always buck the system, always go and find the most dumb thing that I can do just to push the bounds of like what I should be doing.
I read I think it was, I don't remember which personality test it was, but it was like this long evaluation. And it talked about how my personality type I want to poke you. And just a little bit because I want to see what you'll do. Because I'm always wanting to
instigator.
Well, I want to be able to predict things.
Okay.
So I want to see what you'll do. So I'm outgoing, but at the same time, a lot of times I'm just sitting watching.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to, and I'm really good at predicting. Like I'm really bad at movies. Don't take me to the movie. I already know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I can't do movies either.
I know what's going to happen. I'm like, well, he's about to die.
Because my brain sees it as a problem and it wants to solve the problem.
And it's already solved like 17 minutes in.
Yeah.
Because obviously.
Not all the time. Like there's been a couple that have got me. But like a lot of the time, my brain's sitting here going, oh, I see where this is going. This person portrays this person in the story, and I see their character arc already.
Yeah, I can already predict the whole thing. And so I'll be like, so someone will be doing something and I'll say, well, that's going to end this way. And they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, well, right.
Yeah.
I can remember like 7 years ago, I told my husband, I said, you're going to make me leave you. He goes, no, I'm not. And I'm like, you are.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but like you can see, I love to see behavior patterns. And it's like, if we stay on this course, I actually read something that women aren't necessarily nagging. They see the outcome you don't yet.
Interesting thought.
So like, while your behavior may not be a problem in this moment, right? So have you ever had some woman say something to you that you're like, it's not even an issue?
I'm married.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing. It may not be an issue right now. What she's saying is it's going to be.
Yeah. Or it could be.
It could be. And if we curb it now, then we don't ever have to go there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I also see the valid point on the other end of like, but it's not a problem right now. Like, why are you saying this? But I'm seeing where these behavior patterns are going to take this whole situation and how they can influence and impact. And I love you enough to want to change that trajectory, right? I care for you enough and what our future is going to look like that person saying to you, like, I want to negate that and move away from it.
That gives a certain aspect of beauty to the nagging.
I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can try to remember that when I feel like I'm being bothered or pushed towards something and my brain goes, rebel.
Yeah. And in the rebel thing, I've had to learn to give space. So like pausing or asking for time to pause. Like, can you give me a second with that? Or, yeah, let me get back to you. Because my brain is like, let's do this right now. Let's go. And I will make really bad impulsive decisions. I think in 7th grade, I stopped at I don't know if I should say. Yeah, I was
you
at a
can share
Standard
what you
Drug
want.
in in St. Charles, Missouri, and a friend goes, "You should take that hand dryer."
Oh yeah, we're past statute of
Yeah,
limitations.
I
You can
think
talk about
so,
all your
right? Yeah.
crimes.
Well, I think
Well,
Standard Drug's closed now too, so they can't come at me,
oh
right?
yeah, you're
Yeah,
good.
I stole a hand dryer. That's wired.
Wait, a hand like at a
Like the
bathroom?
wired hand dryer.
Like the thing that blows the air on your hands in a
Yes.
bathroom?
Who does that?
You're the first.
I think so.
First I know of.
I don't even know what it's just like sat under my bed. I don't know what you do with that. But I was impulsive.
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn to breathe in between because I would,
Okay.
and then later I'd be like, oh, stupid. You could have died and electrocuted yourself. Right? You could like all these things where I'm like, that was so dumb. I had a client one time where it's like walking and somebody goes, oh, you got a bullfrog? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, put it in your mouth. And the kid goes, and then he looks at me. I go, take it out. And he does. And he goes, why did I do that?
Yeah.
And that's how my brain feels a lot of times. So if you go, Chelsea, what do you think about this? I'll go, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like not even invested in the answer. I'm just talking. And I have to create space and just stop and be like, okay, hold on, let me think about that. And that's okay.
Yeah. I totally feel that on a deep level of like my brain can react before I really even know what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to like responding or reacting. Because I think that's a big significant difference. Like I function very well in reaction. Like my brain will just be like bop, 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 and just spit out a reaction. And I'm trying to learn to respond, which is actually sitting back and going, let me think about this and not just immediately dump some knowledge on you or, try to be the smartest person in the room, reactionary. Like it is tough when everything in you knows what you're capable of, but you have to kind of step back and be like, let's let this breathe.
Yeah. Or did anyone ask?
Yeah.
Did they actually ask me? Because sometimes nobody asked.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is, so in counseling, there's a lot of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is like, it's like a debit credit kind of thing, right? So how many times are you withdrawing versus depositing? So if I'm out here trying to help everyone that doesn't want help, then that is going to be a credit, right? Someone's pulling something out of that. That's not a deposit. So they're pulling out because they didn't ask. And people who aren't asking, they don't want it. They're not receiving. They're not even in a position to receive. They didn't ask. So it's a higher level of burnout. Like I had to really work to make my clients ask me.
That was something I've recently discovered in like the weight loss part of things is like the offering information versus being asked for information, because I will information overload someone, just like what you're saying. And now I'll have people come up to me all the time and they'll be like, man, I just really want to lose weight. And everything in me wants to be like, tell them how.
Yeah.
Give them all the information.
Know the answers. Yeah.
But I won't offer help to anybody. If someone asks me for help, I will always be like, yeah, let's sit down and try to figure it out. But I've totally stopped offering to help people with that problem because it burned me out. That's why I went and got a job and I'm doing the podcast now instead of doing one-to-one coaching, because I still have information to get out to people, but I'm offering it freely to those who want to step in and grab it. It's out here in the ethos, but I'm not going to be like, I'm going to specifically sit down with you and offer you a bunch of information without you asking.
Because that is my nemesis. Because for me and for you too, for what you said, if someone's up there trying to tell you what to do and you didn't ask, no, I'm going to do the opposite, even if I was going to do it. But it puts someone in an open position to receive, like they're asking and wanting to receive. And yeah, we do have things to share, but if you don't want to know it, right? And so that came up. So my husband is an addict. That's why we're going through a divorce. Mm-hmm. And my brother is an addict. And it was this weird dynamic where in 2021, my brother moved in with me. And he was trying to get sober. He had overdosed twice on heroin.
Okay.
And it was this strange and interesting thing to learn where I watched my brother seek it. I mean, with a fierceness.
Seek the heroin?
Recovery.
Oh, seek recovery.
And to seek out support and to ask people who he trusted to have authority and he has wise wisdom and who to trust, right? And then do it, even if he didn't want to do it.
Mm.
And then I got to see, my spouse is not doing that. And it was such an interesting contrast of what that looks like, because it's not just being sober. It's that, like, are you seeking out this whole different way of life? And are you allowing people to have authority and to help support you in that? Like, because if the only thing my brain's telling me to do is to like use or to go off the rails, then I need someone else. I need another voice to start overpowering that.
Mm.
But it's so my brother has 2 years, over 2.5 years, I think.
That's
sober.
beautiful.
And he just opened a recovery church in Licking, Missouri.
Wow.
Yeah, he's doing meetings.
Well,
and they have meals.
congratulations to your brother. What's your brother's name?
Jacob.
Congratulations, Jacob. I hope you're listening to this, and that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Keep it up, dude.
Well, and it's just, I think when we're open, right? So I knew he was struggling, but he wasn't asking for anything.
And doing what you do for a living, that's...
Yeah. So can I tell you the story? Because this is my favorite.
That's what we're here for.
So I hadn't talked to my brother in a long time, and I work at a chiropractic clinic as an office manager, and we had 2 clinics at the time. One was out in Martinsburg, Missouri, which is an hour drive from Troy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm driving, and I'm about to the point where I don't have service. And for some reason, the night before, I didn't sleep at all. Super weird, like not a wink, like wide awake. It was that's weird for me. So I am tired. Like I'm like, please God, let me arrive home. And right before the point I'm going to lose service, I get this very strong feeling to call Jake. And I pull over and call. I don't really want to, right? Because I'm begrudgingly obedient. So I'm like, okay, fine. All right, let's see. He's not going to answer because he hasn't been answering me, right? And so I call and his phone's disconnected. And I'm like, okay. So I call his wife, Megan, who is a wonderful human who I love very much. And she is in a panic. I cannot believe you're calling me right now. Jake he just left this treatment facility and I don't really know what to do. And he wants to come home. I mean, she's in a full-blown panic and God just allowed me to answer her prayer, right? That one just means so much to me. And she's like, I don't know what to do. He can't come home, right? He's going to die. He can't come home. And I'm getting goosebumps. So my brother, I can hear him yelling when she pulls up to where he is in the background, which if you know Jake, he's so gentle. It's hard. It was hard to hear it. So he's like, why are you on the phone with my sister? Well, he's like yelling, and he knew I'd been working at the Dream Center at the time. He's like, I'm not going there. And she's like, you're going to your sister's. And I was like, okay, okay, he's coming here. But I couldn't go get him. I'd been awake for forever.
Yeah.
And it's 3 hours to drive to Licking, 3 hours back. There's no way I would survive that. Well, he and my dad were on not great terms. Like they just had some things to work through. And that's not why I called my dad. I often call my dad in times of stress. So I just called my dad and I was like, you have to go get Jake. I have not slept and I have to sleep. I cannot go get him, but he is not okay and you have to go get him. And so my dad was actually working like up at the health department that day, like doing this whole event. He's like, okay, I'm leaving now.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he and Jake got this whole opportunity to have a conversation they should have had, that they needed to have. And he made a lot of hard decisions. And I told him, I said, I can't do this for you. There are people who put their names on lists because they want to be available to help people in recovery. You need to find a list and you need to call people. And so he called all of them and one called him back. And that man he is wonderful. Adam is wonderful. And he took Jake 3-4 times a week to church. They had groups, they had meetings, they had dinner, they had breakfast, they had church, all of it. I mean, just fostered him because Jake didn't have a car, and I watched him shift from someone who was angry and scared and pacing the floors into someone who had peace and would pray over me before I went to bed at night and would show up for his kids and have patience and validate his wife's experience of addiction, right? Because she was also a victim in all of that, as well as the kids. Like,
Yeah.
and to be able to own those hurts and to do that's hard. All those hard things. And I don't know, it's just such a blessing to have been able to be a part of that and to live beside him while he went through all that.
What is that like to be the spouse of someone that you see struggling with that? Because especially someone like you who has such a deep understanding of it on a scientific level and a psychological level, to have your spouse struggling and suffering from this addiction and you're getting a front row seat to the thing that you signed up to put your life towards and like help people. Like, what is that like for you? Was that like for you specifically?
So I thought I knew what addiction was, right?
Yeah.
I had no idea. I really didn't have any idea.
Like the book understanding
Yeah, I'm
versus
like,
practical.
I understand it, right? And in my experience, I'd really just worked with kids, 13 to 17-year-old boys that have been dropped off by their parents. And that is very different than that severe addiction space. It's terrifying. Wondering, like, are you alive? Standing there watching to see if someone's still breathing. Knowing when they leave that they could probably kill somebody while they're driving. I don't know how many times I just called the state patrol or the sheriffs because I thought it through long term. I'm like, I can't live with that. And where we lived, people I loved lived on that road. Pastor Jesse and Missy live on that road, right? Brandon Dambeck live on that road. Jenny and Mike lived on that road. And I couldn't, I don't know. You don't receive anything. There's no relationship. It is watching someone be a slave to addiction. And every time you try to connect or get in the way of it, you're attacked. Because it's grandma who doesn't have the food ready.
You're standing in the way.
Yeah, I'm standing in the way of something that's so vital. And the other thing that comes with that is I love his family. And I did my best to tell them what was happening as it was happening and trying to get him help. He didn't want it. And I've learned a lot about how being the spouse can often put you as the victim of emotional abuse, of verbal abuse, of financial abuse, of character assassinations, of just I've never tried to harm him. But I think when you're in addiction, it is a threat, right? When someone's doing the right thing or saying, like trying to help you, you're a threat to the addiction. You're a threat to the substance. And I was a threat. And so being that, take the gloves off and you're going after it. And so I've received, threats and text messages because there's also post-separation abuse. Which is something I'm learning about. And the thing that was most eye-opening for me was that I don't think I realized how bad it was. And then there was one day I just wanted to get copies of things because I felt like I didn't have access to all the records of our life, right? And I just was feeling that threat and I remember freezing. So I open up our safe and it just had paperwork. I was just going to take a picture of it, right? I'm not doing anything that's against anything, right? But I remembered like this, and I don't know how long I stood like that. I just completely frozen. I couldn't move. It was like, well, what if he comes home and what if this and what if that and then if this and that? And I felt the threat in that moment. And it was so weird because it was like, hold on. And so I think it was a few days after that, I'm talking to Mike and he asked me about, what if it's a blank canvas? And I think he has some guilt over this because it was like right after that, it's like, I have to make a plan to go. Because if I'm feeling that way, because I loved my home, I really did.
Yeah.
And I was just strangling it, trying to hold on to it. And I knew I was either going to find him dead one day, or I was going to go down with the ship. You know, like we were going to have nothing. And I was going to be a shell. I mean, I was grinding my teeth. I ground a crown off. It was new in like a year. Isn't that impressive?
I think the scientific term for it is bruxing. I'm a bruxer.
Yeah, are you?
I'm a big bruxer.
Yeah.
I've been sitting here grinding my teeth this whole conversation.
Right off. Chewed it into pieces.
That's impressive.
That's what the dentist said.
Got some good jaw strength.
Jeez. I had heartburn. Every time I would start to head home at night after work, I would have severe heartburn. I wasn't sleeping well, lots of weight gain. And I've learned now that's cortisol, and I had no appetite. So I wasn't eating. And then when I did eat, my body stored it.
Oh yeah.
Then I wasn't eating. Then when I did eat, and it wasn't an intentional thing. I couldn't eat really. I had no appetite. Chronic pain increased like crazy. I don't know. I had sad Saturdays. I made up sad Saturdays because every other day I had to show up and I had to be a person and I had to do stuff, you know, like I needed to do stuff. I needed to show up at group and teach, and I wanted to be there and receive. I needed to work 40 hours. I needed to make sure the house was clean and, you know, have the gutters cleaned by somebody, or call somebody to clean so I'm running a whole house. And so I had sad Saturdays, and all day Saturday I could do whatever I want, which was mostly binge watch New Girl and pay $45 to have someone from DoorDash bring me something. It was pretty much nothing. I've had friends stop by and they'll be like, I'm crashing your sad Saturday, but they were lovely and they just laid on the bed with me. Because I realized I needed space to be sad because I kept putting it off.
Yeah.
And so I'd just be driving and then I'd be almost home and I would just start sobbing. I'm like, well, that's dangerous to drive like that. And it sounds so weird, but I think I needed to tell myself, we can have emotions and we get to have them, and we're going to reserve this time that's just for that.
Man, that is brutal.
Yeah.
That's like, it's a living nightmare. You know, like we think about, I've been really struggling with nightmares lately and horrible dreams, and I've struggled with nightmares since I was a little kid. And the ones that really bug me are the ones that like I wake up from and remember. Like sometimes you just don't sleep well and then you kind of forget the dream, but the ones that you remember, but it's like it's almost like a dream that you can't wake up from. That it's like, is this even real? Like how? Because you think back to Chelsea as a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old, and you're like, how the fuck did I end up here? And it becomes such a sobering. Like I think all the time, like, how am I in Troy, Missouri? Like, what am I doing here?
When I first moved here, I was like, why is everyone wearing brown?
I had never seen so much camouflage till I moved out here. I didn't realize it was fashionable. I bought a camouflage hat.
I have a Carhartt now.
I have so
we're assimilated.
This is my one guilty pleasure of the Midwest is I have slowly replaced all of my t-shirts with Carhartt t-shirts, because once I got one, I was like, these are actually pretty good. These are pretty good shirts.
And you have a pocket.
Yeah. The rednecks got one thing right, and it's Carhartt shirts. The pants, suspect. They don't have much stretch to them. And the overalls, I will never be an overall person. I'll wear them ironically to make fun of overall people. Because I'm too cool for overalls. But
way too cool. Yeah. No, it's surreal. Like I think if it feels like you're just kind of floating through it. It's like I'm not fully connected to anything. I'm not fully connected. But I know I was on the right path because I ended up where I ended up with boundaries. Like I slowly increased the boundaries I'd set in my life. So I started off with the substances can't be the solution. Alcohol can't be the event. I will not attend anything where alcohol is the event. If you find out around here, a lot of times that's the event.
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough out here.
Yeah, I didn't do a whole lot for a while.
Yeah.
And then, I won't purchase anything related to your addiction. I won't take you anywhere related to your addiction. I won't bring you anything related to your addiction. That's your responsibility. It's not mine.
Mm.
I'm going to attend church regularly, with or without you. You're always invited. Would love for you to be next to me. I'm not willing to scream and yell, or I'm not willing to allow you to try to poke me until I blow up. And then you say, I can't believe you treat me like that. It's like, when someone does that and all of a sudden you're just like, what the fuck? And you're yelling.
Yeah.
And then they're like, see, this is why we can't get anywhere. See, this is how you act. It's like, really?
Just gaslight you until you catch on fire.
Yes.
And then blame you for catching on fire.
And here's the thing that was so wonderful is I started to realize, and I even said this to him at one point, I said, no one describes me the way you do. No one. No one. And I've asked them, like, am I mean? Like, am I controlling? Am I hateful? Do I offer advice you're not asking for? Is that uncomfortable for you? Like, I would ask people and they're like, I have a friend and former coworker, Billy. He's like, I don't think you see yourself the way other people do. And that stuck with me because I'm like, what is getting in the way of that, of me having a clear perception of who I am? And it is being gaslighted, emotionally abused, like all those things. Like it's been really the last year. So I left September, I think 24th. And so we're almost at a year, right? So, and it took me, I think, 6 months of like to trust that I was like in a safe space, and I had to get a protection order. There were a lot of threats texted and things that are not okay, and there are a lot of violations of that protection order. A lot of things that were said that aren't okay, and it just you're like walking around like this, like what's the next thing? Because if I don't report each thing, then I'm saying I don't care about this thing.
Yeah, it's the boundary thing.
Yeah. And so, and I've learned the courts are so slow.
Very slow.
And that's difficult for me because let's just get it done. Okay.
Yeah.
Like knock out the steps. Like I did everything I'm supposed to do. It's supposed to end this way. Right. And that's that control piece trying to step in because I just want a home that's safe. I want a home that's safe where I want people to feel safe when they come in. So during this time, my niece, Hannah, whom I love very much, she needed a home. And I couldn't give it to her because that wasn't safe for her. And it was so weird because I was able to say that for her, but I didn't internalize that for me. It took a long time. But it was heartbreaking because I want to be a safe space for people to come. Right? I want, we'd fostered my nephew for 2 years and I was grateful to be able to provide that space for him. And I want that to be a safe space for the people I love, that anytime, any place, anytime you need it, come. And that's a value I have. And it started to really push against that hard in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. Like to being able to taste, or like, I didn't host anybody and I love to host people. Like, come over, let's just hang out. Like, I think it just started to get into those places of meaning for me where it really started to invade and chip away kind of at me in a way I wasn't comfortable with anymore. But choosing to leave means that I haven't gotten to talk to my nieces and nephews on his side. That I've lost people I love a lot, a whole lot, and I know he needs them in their corner, in his corner, and so I'm not upset with them at that because here was one of the hardest things for me was I think at first I was mad. How could they not know who I am, right? But they don't understand my behaviors, right? Why would you get a protection order? Why would you leave the way that you did? Because I fled. Saturday morning, I had, I think, 14 people whom I loved dearly move me out. And he stalked around, paced while we were all there. And it was stressful and scary. And I didn't realize that I wasn't safe until I saw Mike. Mike never left my side, I don't think. And I didn't know.
Yeah.
But when you see Mike following you, it's probably for a good reason, right? He's protecting. So we go through all that. I don't want them to have ever been treated the way I was treated. And in order for them to understand my behavior, that would have had to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? For them to understand my choices, they would have to understand what I've been through. And I never, ever, ever want them to feel that because it's scary and it sucks and it's awful. And I loved him and I was committed to that forever plan. And I did everything that I could ever think of to try to maintain that plan. And that wasn't enough.
Yeah. Well, he's no longer him anymore, and he becomes the substance.
And it is heart-wrenching, right? I mean, it is awful to watch the person you love just slowly chip away. And I don't hold that against any of his family. Any of the space that they've created between me and them, I completely understand. And there's nothing to be forgiven. I'm not even upset. I don't want them to understand my behavior. And that's been a hard one.
Yeah. That is a very difficult side of things, is like, especially someone like you who has such a big heart for people and cares about people so much, to have to let go of the way that people feel about you.
That is
It,
heavy.
literally, my wife last night, we were sitting on the couch and I was talking about us doing today's podcast. And I was just like, I'm a little nervous about this one because I have a feeling I'm going to talk about some things in my life that are tough. And I'm sure Chelsea's going to have to talk about some things that are tough. And like, this is going to be a harder podcast. And every inclination in me is going to be to try to make jokes and lighten it up. And I'll do that from time to time. But like, this is going to be a serious conversation. And I don't want it to come across the wrong way to people. Like, I want this to be an empowering conversation. And she was just like, you need to stop caring about what other people think about you. And like, because that's something that's held me back for so long, is like, what will my family think about me? What will my friends think about me? What will these people think about me? And it's like, you can never truly step into what you need to step into in life. And you mentioned this before we even started the podcast, and you were talking about something that you had been listening to that talked about this, but like, you can never really be what you need to be until you stop worrying about what everyone else wants you to be. Like, you can't let everyone's thoughts of what you're doing affect what you do. Who gives a shit? Like, if anybody in my family over the age of 40 just heard me say that one sentence, who gives a shit, they're like, oh, the Jesus plugs, get the Jesus plugs, put them in my ear. And I'm just like, you said this at one point when we first got to know each other, my God can handle F words. And I was just like, that was one of the most freeing things to hear, because it was like, that's true. Like, if God can't handle that, he's not God. Like, if he can't handle brutal honesty, why does he deserve to be worshiped and praised and loved? Like, the king has to be able to handle the most insubordinate citizen as well as the most righteous and upstanding citizen, and love them equally. And that kind of like made me start to feel more comfortable with myself. And like, just like with what you're saying, like, I'm sure that's really tough because you love those people.
Still do.
And there's still like the reason why I asked you what it's like is because when I was struggling with my addiction, like, I feel like I took a part of my wife. And it's one of those things that I feel like she still worries, like, well, he could fall back into it. He could fall back into it. And I could, like, in all reality, like, that's the problem with it, is I could. And I guess I've never really understood how fucked up it was for her.
It is.
Because when you're in it, and just like you were saying, like, you're not really addicted until you quit, kind of like, you don't really understand what it's like to be an addict
from it. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, you don't also really understand how much everyone else was suffering around you, and like how much it's like the day after 9/11, everyone's still recovering, and you're just like, you're there, like, you're just standing there, and everyone's gone through this really tragic event, but it's like, you weren't a victim of your decisions that you made. My wife, I wasn't a victim of the decisions that I made. My wife was, my son was, my family was, and taking responsibility for that puts you in a really messed up place, but at the same time, it's the only way that you can ever become something else. Like,
Yeah. So Johan Hari has this really great YouTube video. It's Everything You Know About Addiction is Wrong. It's a TED Talk, and really what he says is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
mm,
And it's so interesting the way that addiction thrives by severing connection. Right? It
yeah,
protects itself by severing that connection.
yeah,
And so who's hurt when you try to sever it? And the thing is it's like, if I saw someone, if you'd been stabbed and you're dying in the road, like, I'm going to come to your aid, right? And try to help you because I want you to live. I care for you. And then, but with addiction, if you come to the aid, it's like, no, get away. I'm fine. That's not what's really happening.
yeah,
No, I'm seeing you suffer. No, I'm fine. Well, are you? Like, you're not. No, I am. It's fine.
yeah,
And it's hard. It's difficult because it does it. I think we're hardwired to crave connection and to need it and
mhm,
require it. There's this thing, it's called uh, betrayal blindness.
okay,
Dr. Ramani, she has a great podcast called Navigating Narcissism. And I've been listening to that, and it's a freeze response, right? So fight, flight, freeze,
yeah,
right? But freeze, if you don't feel empowered to have authority in your life, part of that freeze response may be you do something right in front of my face, or I see evidence of an affair, I see evidence of substance use, and I can actively not know that's happening and become blind to that, because if I were to be aware, it threatens my security in this moment, right? Or my
mm,
attachment to that person. And if that attachment to that person is viewed as vital, right? I mean, that's a big commitment to say I'll spend forever. We'd been together since I was 17.
wow,
Yeah, that's 20 years.
damn,
So that's a vital connection, right? And so that betrayal blindness, what it says is like, if that's threatening that essential connection, I will just take a blind stance to it, and almost out of awareness, right? I'm not really aware, because if I was aware, I might be in danger. There might be a threat that I couldn't avoid.
mhm,
So in order to stay in this moment, I need to not know what's happening. And so what they say the solution to that is one, being aware that that's a possibility, but two, having solid support systems. Having people, which that commitment to attend church every Sunday allowed me to develop people
mhm,
who would tell me who they saw me as, so that I had a clear picture of who I am when someone else was trying to distort it. Um, People who I think I texted my dad. I said, "Can you talk to your wife about me living with you?" And he says, "I don't have to. We've already talked about it a year ago. When are
wow,
you moving in?" I
mm,
wasn't thinking about moving a year ago, right?
but
They knew,
they already knew,
but they were waiting on me.
and that's probably tough on them to watch you go through that
Yeah.
for as long as you went through it.
Yeah. He's like, "You have no idea how many times my stepmom Amy wanted to just come rip you out of the house."
Seriously,
Yeah. And I have 5 brothers, 5 little brothers. So how many times did they want to?
yeah, I can only imagine.
And how far out did that hurt branch, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when I was going through everything with my wife, like, to see how defensive my brothers came to me, it's like, first off, yeah, she may have cheated, but I'm a drug addict. Like, I'm kind of,
Right, to
I'm,
talk about that.
yeah, it's like, but like they were so defensive of me and wanting to protect me in that situation. It's like, I can't imagine what it'd be like if I was their sister. Like, and I don't want to say that, like, men feel like women are powerless or that they're not able to defend themselves, but it's like, there is a different, I've always looked at love meaning protection and provision. It's like, I protect and I provide for this person. And when you love somebody on a deep level, there's this innate draw that you need to, this overwhelming desire to protect and provide for that person. When you see them being hurt,
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine the restraint it takes to not want to step out in that and do something. So the control that your family had, but also the patience, and then you arriving at this place, like, that's a beautiful story in itself.
Yeah, and my brother Justin, I have really watched him because he has this way of, if you say something he doesn't really want to engage with, he'll say, "I see," and that's it. And it's such a cool, like, it's really resonated with me where I'm like, I need to get to that place where I don't have to jump in and engage with all of it. It's like, okay, I see. But the other thing Justin's done pretty regularly is like send me, we both love music,
Mhm.
right? And growing up, we listened to a lot of punk rock together. So it's like, do you want to come to this concert with me? And it's like, yeah. My brother does this cutest thing. I love it. And I still haven't gotten it on video. But when the song's really good and he's doing it, he's like, and just so you know,
It
he
just
is
in
a
his
very
feels.
large man. And he's over here just like, getting it. And it's joyful moments, right, that I need. And remembering like where it's at, or like, hey, do you want to come over? Or hey, do you want to do this? And I love my brothers, every single one of them, and they mean a lot to me. And it is wonderful to see them as husbands and dads, because it's a stark contrast to what I was in, and kind of a reminder of like, this is different and it can be different. And I love their wives, I love their people, and getting to just spend time with them.
Yeah. Man, that is a crazy, crazy, I don't want to say story because that makes it sound like it's not true, but it's like you have battled through a crazy set of circumstances over the last almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
And like, I can't imagine what that's like. Going through my own set of things and then hearing you talk about it, like it leads me to a very introspective place of, I don't ever want my wife to go through what you've gone through. And that means I need to step up. And when I see myself entering into behavior patterns that I know will lead to that, because that's really the issue. It's like the addiction, it's what are the behaviors that lead to that open up that door, that it's like there's one thing, it's like I know that door exists, but
Mm-hmm.
am I still holding on to the keys, like, and the multiple keys that will unlock that door?
What's on the shelf?
Yeah. So that is tough. And
Well, and the other thing I think about is
that's
like
brutal.
that my story includes attending support group,
Yes.
having friends who have been through it and who were speaking into my life, asking for support, attending Al-Anon, attending church, going to retreats, doing research, right? And reading the books I'm recommended to read. And so not everybody has those blessings already in place in what they're going through. They may not have any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like mine's more best case scenario.
Yeah. I mean, and this is, not to turn this into something about me, but like, m- when I say that we met at the support group stuff, like, yeah, it's great, but what you did for me in a moment of my deep crisis of like, you did kind of poke, but you poked and I needed that because I was in a place where I was contemplating if my family would be better off if I wasn't around. If I essentially just ended my life, like, would my wife and son be better off? Because I had convinced myself that she would find a better man and that she would get remarried and that I was just holding her back. And that was the lie that I had believed about myself because I was so disappointed in my decisions. Like, what am I doing in Troy, Missouri? I'm so lost in all of this that I had convinced myself of all that. And we were leaving group one day and you just asked me if I was okay. And I was like, I kind of tried to shrug it off. And you're like, hey, I know something's not okay. You wouldn't have stuck around if something wasn't okay. And I had trusted you because I knew what type of person you were. I had seen who you were. I'd seen you in group. I'd seen you interact with other people, and I knew that you were a trustworthy person. And I opened up to you in that moment, and Mike was there, and I opened up to Mike, and I told you guys what was going on. And both of you, you didn't meet me with this like if I were to tell somebody else that, they might be like, you need to get help. It's like, you guys just sat there and listened, and we talked in the parking lot for like an hour. And I just remember that was the beginning of me trying to find a support network, really, was like, and Mike's become a big part of that. And like, even though we don't interact as often with like the group being done, it's like just knowing that you're there and knowing that there's a person like you out there is good enough for me, because I know that at any time, if I was really struggling, I could be like, Chelsea, you know, that conversation we had in the parking lot, I'm really struggling. And you would stop you would stop what you're doing. You, not maybe everything, but like you would stop what you're doing to help if you could. And like, I think a lot of people genuinely feel like they're on an island by themselves, and they believe that because they believe their problems are so unique to them that no one can help. But it's not that way. And the first step in like really, really getting to a place that you can grow past it is being vulnerable, like being vulnerable with somebody and telling them what's going on, but also being someone worth being opened up to. Because like you said about putting a credit into something versus like pouring in, you know, giving and receiving, like having a credit, it's like, you can't just dump on everybody. You also need to become the type of person who can receive and then help. Like you may start by receiving, like by giving to somebody else and then letting them give back to you. Like, here's some information about my life that I'm struggling with. And then they give. But you can't just constantly be in this, I need. Like, you got to do something. And there are people like you out there that your heart is in that place, and that's just amazing.
I was so impressed with you that night.
That was a tough night.
You felt defeated and you could see it, but you really had hope still there, or you wouldn't have lingered. You know, you wouldn't have kind of waited, and you were open to receive. I mean, you were eye contact, body was shifted towards each of us as we talked. Like you were in a position of receiving. And that is a huge deal, because nothing we would have said would have mattered otherwise. And I know that God was talking through me that night, because I don't remember anything I said to you. And that's what happens every time.
I don't even know if it necessarily even mattered, like the words that were said. It was the posture.
Yeah.
It was your posture towards me. It was Mike's posture towards me. You know, Mike's got a funny way of showing love sometimes, because he'll like smack you in the back of the head, punch you in the face, and then he'll be like, all right, I love you.
Yeah.
And then just walk off.
Yeah. But
verbally.
I want to say what you said before about posture.
Well, the posture is what mattered more than the words.
Because I think we get hung up on that. You know, like I don't really know what to say. I don't know if I should even step in or do anything. It's like, but you don't have to have the answer, because I can't solve anything for you.
Yeah. What was the most meaningful thing you said about your friends on your Saturdays? Was just laying in bed with you and watching New Girl. Like, it wasn't what they said. No. It's just company, presence.
Yeah.
That this last 3 years have been dystopian, because there has been such a stark divide in communion amongst people. Like, we feel so separated and we feel so antagonistic towards each other, and it is so hard to have meaningful relationships. It feels like with this, like, there's almost like been this purposeful attack on community by our government or a supernatural being or whatever you want to say it is. And the more that we get isolated, the more antagonistic we get towards each other. And it's like, that is because when you have communion and you have community and you have support, and you actually know that you're not alone in this, you're empowered. You are beyond empowered. And like what addiction does, just like with your husband, it seeks to isolate you. And it does that by you cutting off everything that you see as that threat.
Yeah.
And we now are addicted to our phones, we're addicted to our technology, and we feel this false sense of connection in our isolation. And it's like it's so broken. And I think that what a lot of people really need is they need something like a church. They need something like a support group, something where they can interact with real people and just try to meet a couple people that you have enough in common with and start to create this group of people around you that helps build you up and doesn't always just ask.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always just need, but it's just happy with your presence.
That's actually what you just said is a good gauge for me on whether or not I will engage in a relationship with somebody. How do you act when I say no?
Yeah.
Right? When I share my limits, how do you respond to those things? Like most of all my friends, if we have plans and I am just tired and I feel everything in my body saying you just need to sleep, or today you need to rest. I can tell them that. And that's totally fine. Let's see what's on the calendar for next week or 2 weeks from now or next month. Like there's no issue there. And that is powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's safe. It's a safe place to ask for what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And to meet those needs without feeling like now this relationship that's so important to me would be on the rocks, or be threatened. It shouldn't be.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if literally all of your friendships and all of your relationships were like on some credit score system of like, well, she canceled on me last time, so I'm demoting her down in my friend group. And it's like, rather than, hey, Chelsea's canceled on me the last 2 times, maybe I need to call her and just, hey, is everything okay? I don't mind that you canceled, but
I was checking in.
I just want to know, is everything okay? Is there anything I can do? Do you want to do something one-on-one? Like being there for the people that you truly care about in a complete capacity, not just when it's convenient for you.
And that was a good thing too of just the asking. Like just asking someone like, are you wanting advice? Are you wanting a distraction? Like what are you needing?
Yeah. I genuinely think that we as people have become very self-indulgent and just, I don't see, if I say self-centered, that makes everyone sound, we have become very focused on our outward appearance to people.
Okay, yeah.
To the point where like, we have this image of what we look like online and this reality of who we are in our home when we're alone. And I think Heidi Stobar at one time, she shared something like on her on her Instagram. It was like a joke about how, don't tell me you saw me in my car when I was like singing Taylor Swift and I was alone. Like that's my alone time. Like nothing exists in that moment. But then that contrasted with who you are alone in your car is who you are in reality. It like made me realize that we do want to appear a certain way to certain people. And one thing that I try not to do is if someone says, hey, how are you doing? And I'm not doing good, I try not to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. Life's good. I'll just be like, life sucks, a bag of dicks, and I'm here.
Yes.
Like
that was one of the first parts of my healing was that commitment to like being honest when someone asks. Like if someone's truly asking, or if it's a person I've allowed, to be a part of my life, answering honestly.
Yeah.
And it's awful.
And sometimes you have to kind of like test certain people in a way. Like
do they want to know?
Yeah. Like sometimes you might throw out there like life sucks and they're like, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And immediately it's like, okay, that person's a casual relationship. And then you tell someone that in a parking lot and they go, I'm not leaving this parking lot until I know that you're going to be safe. And you realize this is a real human being that I feel safe with. And that's what I feel like people are craving. And we are just so invested in shallow and broad relationships rather than deep and specific relationships. And like, not everyone deserves to be in your corner. I share this with a lot of people. The people who you share your lowest lows with are the people that you should share your highest highs with. You don't, not everyone needs to know everything that you're doing good in your life. It should only be those people that you would be most vulnerable with, because those are the people who really are going to cheer you on. It's like, who cares if you have 10,000 people that think what you did was cool? It's like, you just need that core group of people that you're willing to take on the world with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would completely agree with that.
Yeah. And not to say that like there's anything bad with being social and having lots of people in your life, but if you don't have anything deep and real and rooted in the ground, that storm's going to come. And when all that's blown away, you're going to be left with nothing. And I genuinely, I don't say this from a point of like, this is what's wrong with America. It's like, no, I say this from a point of, I don't want to see people fall apart like I fell apart because I hadn't sowed seeds in a good place. And I had just never invested in people because I didn't trust. And I'm learning how to trust. And it's the most difficult and rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. And that, I don't know, I just based on even I know we've talked about so much today, but it's like, find some support people. Like I think some people, they think this podcast is like going to be all about, the weight loss, or it's going to be about this, or it's going to be about that. And it's like, no, this is life.
Yeah, I'm a complete mess. I'm just like blessed to live in a bedroom at my dad's house, like
Yeah.
I have a job, but it's not all rainbows, it's not all right
Yeah.
where I'd like it to be. But I think that's true for most people. There's some transition, there's some space that's happening for them that's difficult. I think as soon as I solve one area, something else pops up.
Yeah. I mean, how boring would life be if there wasn't problems?
Mm-hmm.
It would.
We wouldn't grow.
No. And like, one thing that I find beautiful is that stress causes plants to do beautiful things. Like, it causes the grapes to produce a more bountiful fruit that's stronger and has a better flavor, and they make the best wine during stressful seasons. And it's like, so if you have the right support, you have the right farmers tending to those grapes during a really hot, windy season, it's going to make beautiful wine. But if you don't, they're just going to wither up and die on the vine. And it's like, that's the people around you. It's like the storms are going to come. And if you don't have the right people around you, you're going to wither up. And I don't want to see that for people. I genuinely don't. But at the same time, I don't have the energy to do it for you.
Right.
I don't have the energy to care about you if you don't care about yourself. And that's what's tough. That's the hard part. It's hard when you're constantly caring for people who don't care about themselves.
Well, and connection is linked as one of the primary ways of healing in so many ways.
Yeah.
So many ways. And so it's just finding out you're not the only one helps a lot with hope, because you're not the only one going through it. And there's other people who are already on the other side of it, and they have wisdom, and people who want to empower you to travel the direction you want to go, not directing your travels, but encouraging you in your hopes and your goals. And people who can sit in the ugly, and who are willing, the 14 people who showed up at my house that day, and that was stressful for them too.
I bet.
And they were willing. Quick. It just took a short text. Yeah, I'm available. Yeah, I'm available. Yep, I'll be there.
Man.
And that's, and the other part of it is I have a great work environment. I have the blessing of working with my best friend of 20 years. And her husband, who is also a great friend and wonderful, and my coworker Catherine and coworker Erica, like they have, it's a positive environment space. It's a positive space to work in. Yeah. Like, we love patients that are coming in, and we love one another, and we show that support and care for one another. Because I don't know if I would have survived without having that space.
Yeah, I've never heard a bad thing said about the Carter family.
Oh,
they're beautiful people, and I know they're not my chiropractors. I haven't been a chiropractor in a while, but I've never heard a bad word said about them. just good people.
Wonderful, caring, kind. And I think so Lauren and I worked at Sonic together. And so she's really introverted and I'm really extroverted, And so I just pestered her. And then one day she punched me and then we were best friends. Like, I'm pretty sure that's how it went. Like,
that's a beautiful story.
She punches like a man. So it hurts. But those, like, fostering those long-term friendships of people who know who you are.
Yeah.
Has been a key factor.
Well, this seems like a decent natural stopping point for this conversation. I feel like this is one of those things that we might have to do a part 2 and come back on and talk about more stuff. But this has been a heavy conversation, but it's been a good one. And I have been so blessed by your vulnerability today to share so openly what your life has looked like. And I hope that it puts the boldness in another woman potentially out there to find her value and find her worth and stand up for that. And, if you're in a position where you're struggling to find the strength to leave an abusive relationship, or you're struggling with a spouse in addiction, you could be a man and be struggling this with your wife. You have value, you have worth, and you need to get the right people around you to hopefully help you discover that within yourself and stop believing the lies that person may be projecting outwardly towards you. And I would just encourage you, if you're struggling and you're listening to this, to know your value. And if you need help, come stop by Journey Church. We have plenty of people that would love to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully there's a little light there, because the story included 2 marriages and one survived and is thriving.
Yeah. Your brother.
Mm-hmm.
And that's beautiful. And also, if, keep praying for your spouse, or you'll know, just like you knew it was over. And that's probably one of the hardest decisions you've ever had to make. And I'm just glad that you're still here.
Yeah,
I'm glad that you're in the local area and I get the opportunity to sit down and talk to you. And this conversation is going to bless so many people.
I've appreciated the opportunity.
Hey, thank you all for joining. And I am beyond appreciative for every single one of you listeners. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, I'm down.
Alrighty. Thank you. Have a great day.